students, do you know that motivation is not just a mental state but a complex neuroendocrine dance? Yes. So you might think your decision to hit the gym or finish the chapter or chase your dream is purely a matter of your willpower. But behind your conscious mind, a team of chemical messengers, a team of invisible chemical agents is pulling the strings, deciding whether you feel unstoppable or entirely demotivated. Yes, I'm talking about our rewarding hormone or the happiness hormone called dopamine. And we are at the amazing platform of PW NEET English again with another chapter of class 11 biology, that is chemical coordination and integration, the most interesting chapter from human physiology. Myself Bishwajit welcoming you again to our platform PW NEET English. Today we are going to finish this chapter, and after finishing the video we have to practice some really important questions, and for that already you have a DPP given in PW app, and the link is given in the below description box. You just have to click it. And also we have a PW NEET English WhatsApp channel for updating about the notifications, live classes, questions, posts and many more things. So let's start today's chapter. So you need to talk about endocrine system, that means all the glands and their secretion. We call them chemical messengers or hormones. So the topics we are going to cover, their endocrine glands and their hormones, human endocrine system, hormones of heart, kidney and gastrointestinal tract, and mechanism of hormone action. Okay, so let's introduce the chapter like this. What is the connection between the two coordination system of our body? One is neural system and another is endocrine system. One is run by physical messaging system and another by chemical messengers called hormones. So when your body needs rapid integration or coordination or control, point to point messaging, and obviously quick response against some stimulus, then your physical messenger or your nerve impulse will start working. But whenever you need a gradual but slow response and you have a lot of cells to target and a continuous regulation of cellular functions, then you have to deploy the hormones, the chemical messengers of your body. So that's the basic difference between neural system and endocrine system, and also the function of hormones or chemical messengers are mostly energy efficient if we compare with physical messaging system. But for maintaining the proper homeostatic condition of your body or my body, jointly these two systems are coordinating and regulating the physiological functions, right? Okay. Now let's talk about some historical aspect, the term hormones, the term endocrine glands. So basically, when we are studying about these hormones and endocrine glands, we call the study as endocrinology, and father of endocrinology is Thomas Addison. Thomas Addison. This is a separate, a different personality. Thomas Edison is associated with the electric bulb. This is Thomas Addison, called as father of endocrinology. And the term hormones, coined from the Latin word or Greek word called hormao, that means to excite or to stimulate, right? And when you talk about hormone, secretin is the first discovered hormone, and it was discovered by these two scientists called Sterling and Bayliss. Yes. Now, most of the hormones are endocrine in nature. Now, what do you mean by endocrine? Endocrine means ductless gland. Crine means secretion and endo means inside the bloodstream, because they don't have their own ducts. Yes. Now, if this is one of our endocrine glands, suppose any of the endocrine gland, now it's producing some chemical messengers inside the gland, but the target is present at a distal site. This is the target. Now, without any duct or pipeline, how it will be sending the chemical messengers towards the target? So, it will be secreting the hormones or the chemical messengers into our bloodstream. And this blood will be carrying these chemical messengers, and these hormones will be diffusing towards the target tissue, because whenever a gland is secreting the chemical messenger, it will search for the receptor present on the target tissue or the target gland or target cells, right? So we can say that hormones are non-nutrient chemicals. Because why it's non-nutrient? We won't be talking about the calorific value of the hormones, right? Hormones can be of lipid derivative or a amino acid derivative. Hormones can be of protein or polypeptide type. So we talk about proteins and lipids when you are talking about our nutrients, right? It's present inside the food. But these hormones, either they are lipid derivative or steroid hormones or iodothyroid hormones or protein hormones, they are acting as signaling molecule rather than the importance of calorific value. So we are not consuming hormones, our body is not consuming hormones to produce energy for us, but acting as a signaling molecules which act as intracellular messengers. That's why you are calling them signaling molecules, and are produced in trace amount. Now this is very important. Now, these hormones are produced in trace amount. Now what do you mean by trace amount? Means very little amount, very little amount, right? And after their function, hormones are getting destroyed, except few hormones like T4, the thyroxine hormones. They can be stored. Most of the hormones cannot be stored into our biological system. They will stimulate the gland, and after performing their function, they will get destroyed, and your particular source gland will be producing new amount of hormone for our body function, right? Okay, now here is written feedback mechanisms. One of the most important properties of few of the hormones, not all of the hormones. Feedback mechanism. What is feedback? Few hormones have capability to influence their own secretion. They can stimulate their own secretion or they can inhibit their own secretion. So that is called feedback mechanism. For example, suppose there is a hormone called thyroxine hormone. Okay, so if there is excess thyroxine in your body, it will be sending a negative signal to its source glands, to its stimulant glands like hypothalamus and pituitary, and please stop secretion of my stimulating signals. So that is called negative feedback. If there is less thyroxine hormone present into your body, present into your bloodstream, then this will be giving a positive signal to the stimulant glands called hypothalamus or pituitary. Please secrete such chemical message which can stimulate my thyroid gland to secrete more and more amount of thyroid hormones. So that is about negative feedback or positive feedback. I'm mentioning it in a proper manner. Suppose your hypothalamus secretes thyrotropin releasing hormone. This thyrotropin releasing hormone will give a signal to your anterior pituitary to release thyroid stimulating hormone. Now this thyroid stimulating hormone through the bloodstream will reach to thyroid gland and will tell thyroid to release thyroid hormones called T4 and T3, right? Now in your body, if there is less quantity of T4 and T3 is produced, that will give a signal to hypothalamus, and that will tell hypothalamus, please start secretion of more TRH. If there is more TRH, pituitary will release more TSH. If more TSH is influencing thyroid, that will increase the production of T4 and T3. So that is called positive feedback. Now, if there is hyper secretion of T4 and T3 happening inside your body, enough amount of T4 and T3 hormones are present into your bloodstream, your blood titer, so that will be giving a negative signal or negative feedback to hypothalamus. Then it will tell hypothalamus, please pause secretion of TRH. If there is no or less TRH, there will be a less secretion of TSH. If there is less TSH secretion, less stimulation upon thyroid gland, then T3 and T4 secretion will be decreased. So that's how feedback mechanism for few hormones will be working, whereas few other hormones, they have certain stimulatory hormones or inhibitory hormones. Now the hormones which don't have any stimulator hormones or inhibitor hormones, they will they will follow this feedback mechanism. Okay. Now let's compare between this endocrine system of invertebrate and vertebrates. So when you're talking about invertebrates, obviously they are inferior kind of animals. So they have simple endocrine system with few hormones, whereas vertebrates, we are advanced. They are advanced animals. We have many endocrine glands with large number of hormones. Okay. Now let's take a look at cell signaling mechanism, this chemical messaging system produced by our hormones. So there are three kinds of cell signaling available inside our body, happening inside our biological system: autocrine, paracrine, and endocrine. Now what do you mean by autocrine? You can see the names of these hormones: interleukin 1, gastrin. If this is the cell, hormone producing cell, if this is the hormone producing cell, suppose this cell is producing the hormone gastrin, the receptor of this hormone will be present upon this particular gland or this particular tissue. So when a hormone is acting on its own cell or own tissue, so that is called as autocrine. Crine means secretion. Paracrine hormones, estrogens or testosterone or androgens. Yes. Now when a cell is secreting a particular hormone and that is acting upon neighboring cells, as because neighbor cells will be pausing the receptor of this particular hormone. That phenomena is called as paracrine hormone, giving signal to the adjacent or the neighboring tissue. Now last one is endocrine secretion. Most of the hormones are endocrine in nature. They are GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone; FSH, follicle stimulating hormone; LH, luteinizing hormone; TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. Now suppose if I talk about this TSH, that will be secreted by pituitary gland, anterior pituitary, but will be acting on a distal gland called thyroid. This FSH will be produced and released by pituitary, but that will be targeting a distal gland or tissue present inside the gonads, inside testis or ovary. So that's why we are calling them endocrine. They are produced by a gland and targeting a distant or a distal tissue or group of cells for exerting their actions, and they are traveling with the help of our bloodstream or body fluids. That's why you are calling them endocrine. Okay. Now this autocrine and paracrine, as because they are giving signal to the own gland or own tissue or to the neighboring gland, you can also call them as local hormones. Yes, this autocrine and paracrine hormones are examples of local hormones because they are traveling nearby regions. Okay. Now another difference of hormones, different kinds of two types of hormones are given: tropic hormones and non-tropic hormones. Now what do you mean by tropic hormones? These are the specific hormones which will be targeting on endocrine glands. They are called tropic hormones, and the examples are given here: TSH and FSH. TSH secreted by endocrine gland, and that will be targeting another endocrine gland secreted by pituitary and targeting thyroid. Non-tropic hormones, that target is non-endocrine glands. Examples are given here: thyroxine and adrenaline. Right? Now, thyroxine will be secreted by endocrine gland, thyroid gland, but the target tissue are normal body tissues, normal non-endocrine tissues. That's why you can call these hormones as non-tropic hormones. Okay. Now, when you talk about the entire endocrine system of our body, we have hypothalamus, called master gland or the neuroendocrine control center of our body, pituitary, pineal gland, and their origin can be observed. They are ectodermally originated. When you are talking about embryonic origin of hypothalamus, pituitary, and pineal, they are present into our forebrain region. Okay. Now, these three hormones, thyroid, parathyroid, and thymus, their embryonic origin is endoderm. Embryonic endoderm is the origin of thyroid gland, parathyroid gland, and thymus gland. Also, pancreas. The origin of pancreas is also embryonic endodermal in nature. Now let's come to the next gland, that is adrenal gland or suprarenal gland, present near to our kidneys. That's why name is like this, adrenal. Now when you will be searching for this adrenal gland, it has adrenal cortex, the superficial area, the outer area, and the inner area of this adrenal gland is called adrenal medulla. Now it's very interesting to know that the adrenal cortex is mesodermal in origin, whereas adrenal medulla is ectodermal in origin. And this testis and ovary, they are called as gonads. They're the primary sex organs of our body. They are the major secreting glands of sex hormones, and they will be also responsible for production of these hormones will be responsible for appearance of the secondary sexual characteristics as well as sexual behavior of your body. So both of them are mesodermally originated when you talk about gonads, testis and ovary. Okay, so this was all about endocrine glands of human. Obviously, the male, they will have testes, one pair of testes, and female, one pair of ovaries. Okay. Now, a different aspect of discussion regarding our endocrine glands, it is organized endocrine glands versus non-organized endocrine glands. Now, what do you mean by organized endocrine gland? If this is the endocrine gland, and inside this endocrine gland, these hormone secreting tissues are accumulated into certain region, and under microscope, after staining them, easily you can identify those specific tissues. So that's why we call them organized endocrine glands. They have isolated hormone producing cluster, means bunch of cells or tissue inside them. So that's why we are telling them they are organized endocrine glands, right? But what about non-organized endocrine glands? What do you mean by non-organized endocrine glands? The hormone producing tissues are scattered here and there inside the gland. They are not considered as the major endocrine glands of our body. So these hormone producing cells are present in scattered form. They'll not be forming aggregation or cluster, and you really cannot identify, or it's very difficult to identify under microscope when you are searching for hormone producing cell inside these glands, and they are like heart, kidney and liver, also gastrointestinal tract. Yes, these glands obviously will be producing some very important hormones for us, for the functioning of our body. But these hormone producing cells are diffused with the other kind of cells or tissue inside these particular organs. But when you talk about pituitary, pancreas, thyroid, adrenal, definitely while you are searching under microscope, while you are doing histological study, you are gonna get trace of this hormone producing cells. Okay, now let's start with the first the first gland, first endocrine gland of our body, present into the forebrain region, and that is also called as master. This also act as the neuroendocrine control system of your endocrine universe inside your body. So we are talking about the hypothalamus. Now why it's called as hypothalamus? If you talk the diencephalon, if you talk about the diencephalon region or study the diencephalon region of your brain, this is the diencephalon region. This is the thalamus. This is the thalamus. Below the thalamus, you got your hypothalamus. So it's present below the thalamus. That's why named as hypothalamus. And obviously it's regarded as master gland. Now you all know that master gland is pituitary, and it has the capability to control pituitary. It's the neuroendocrine master. So that's why it's called master, because that will be secreting some neurohormones. The hormones secreted by or produced by hypothalamus, they're produced by some neurosecretory cells or neurosecretory tissue present inside, and we call those bunch of neurosecretory cells as nuclei, and that's why the hormones are called as neurohormones. And one more thing, this hypothalamus is also called as master clock of our body. Now why it's called as master clock of our body? Because it can regulate the pineal gland. Pineal gland is called the biological clock. Pineal gland is known as biological clock of our body, and pineal gland secretes the hormone responsible for maintaining the diurnal rhythm, right? The circadian rhythm of our body, sleep, that will be maintaining the sleep awake cycle. This is called melatonin hormone. Now this melatonin hormone secretion is again under regulation of hypothalamus. So who is clock of our body? It is pineal gland. Now who is regulating the clock? That is the master clock, hypothalamus. Now let's jump into the neurohormones secreted by hypothalamus. Okay, now these neurohormones are grouped into two parts. One is called releasing hormones and another is called inhibitory hormones. Now obviously these neurohormones, they are gonna act on pituitary. Now if these neurohormones are telling pituitary to secrete more and more pituitary hormones, then we will be calling them as releasing hormone. They are giving releasing signal to pituitary. And if they are inhibiting pituitary, they're forbidding pituitary that not to secrete hormone, then we will be calling those hormones as inhibitory hormones. Now who are those releasing hormones? GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone. This hormone will be giving signal to pituitary to release gonadotropins, to release FSH and LH. CRH, corticotropin releasing hormone, that will be giving signal to anterior pituitary to release at ACTH or corticotropin, right? Adrenocorticotropic hormone. So release of corticotropin or ACTH by pituitary is under control of CRH hormone of hypothalamus. PRH, prolactin releasing hormone. This hormone will tell anterior pituitary to release prolactin hormone. TRH, thyrotropin releasing hormone. This hormone will tell pituitary, anterior pituitary to release thyrotropin or TSH. MSH, RH, melanocyte stimulating hormone releasing hormone, that will tell pituitary to release MSH. GHRH, growth hormone releasing hormone, or also this growth hormone releasing hormone, that will be signaling, giving signal to pituitary, anterior pituitary, and will tell please release growth hormone or somatotropic hormone. Okay, now let's come to this inhibitory hormone. GHIH, growth hormone inhibitory hormone. It is also called as hypothalamic somatostatins, that will give inhibitory signal to pituitary, that will stop secretion of growth hormone by pituitary. PIH, prolactin inhibitory hormone. MSHIH, melanocyte stimulating hormone, inhibitory hormones. Okay. Now let's try to make connection lines between the hypothalamus and the pituitary, the connection between the master of master and the master. Okay. Now in latter slide we'll know that pituitary is divided into major two parts. There is posterior pituitary and anterior. There is anterior pituitary and posterior pituitary. This side is anterior pituitary, I'm writing as AP, and this side is posterior pituitary, writing as PP. Now these two parts of pituitary, they have totally different zone of function they are leading. So let's talk about the connection of hypothalamus with anterior pituitary. Now this hypothalamus will be secreting some neurohormones by hypothalamic neurons. Now this is the hypothalamic neuron that will be secreting some releasing hormone or inhibiting hormone. Now this hormone will come into the bloodstream, and the blood vessels which will be leading these hormones towards this anterior pituitary, the tract is called as hypophyseal portal system or hypophyseal portal veins, right? So there are few veins which will be collecting the things from hypothalamus and will be passing through pituitary. Okay, so this blood vascular system found, you can find into this tract of hypothalamus and pituitary, anterior pituitary, is called as hypophyseal portal system or hypophyseal portal vein. Now what do you mean by portal system? Port means the venous blood of hypothalamus is utilizing anterior pituitary veins as the port to release the deoxygenated blood. So that's why we are calling this hypophyseal portal system or hypophyseal portal veins. Okay. and this portal vein will be carrying hormones from hypothalamus, and they will be releasing here, and they will bind with the target cells of the trophic cells present into the anterior pituitary. Yes, the cells which are responsible for production of hormone of anterior pituitary, we call those cells as trophic cells. Now the hormones from hypothalamus will come to anterior pituitary and will be diffused out from the portal system and will be binding to the receptor present on the trophic cells of anterior pituitary. Okay. Now let's establish the connection between hypothalamus and posterior pituitary. Now hypothalamus has some important neurosecretory group of cells called paraventricular nucleus and supraoptic nucleus. They will be releasing oxytocin and vasopressin or ADH. So these two are very important hormones produced by hypothalamus, oxytocin and vasopressin. But these neurosecretory cells will be leading these hormones directly into the posterior pituitary, and they will be stored inside the posterior pituitary region, and the storages of the vesicles where this oxytocin and vasopressin are stored inside this posterior pituitary, we call them herring bodies, and this tract is called hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. Hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. Now what do you mean by hypophysis? This pituitary gland is also called as hypophysis, right? So the tract which is connecting hypothalamus to pituitary, posterior pituitary, is called hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract, and into this posterior pituitary they are depositing these two hormones, very important hormone for us, oxytocin and vasopressin, right? And whenever your body will be requiring them, the posterior pituitary gonna release this oxytocin hormone and vasopressin hormone. But remember, oxytocin and vasopressin are not produced by your posterior pituitary, they are produced by your hypothalamus, just stored into this posterior pituitary region. Okay. Now let's jump to the next gland, the master gland of our body, that is pituitary, also that is called as hypophysis. Okay. Now why it's called hypophysis? Because obviously that's present below the hypothalamus, right? And physis means principle of growth. Yes, the most important hormone produced by pituitary, that is growth hormone or somatotropic hormone, right? That's why it's known as hypophysis. Now why it's called as pituitary gland? There is no scientific reason behind this name. It's an old terminology. These Greek philosophers used to use this term to dictate about this hypophyseal gland or this particular growth hormone secreting gland, right? Okay. Now why we call them master gland, we call it master gland of our body? Because the hormones secreted by this particular gland gonna control or regulate the secretion of all other glands. Either you talk about thyroid gland or talk about parathyroid gland or adrenal gland or testes or ovaries. Every other endocrine glands are under control of pituitary. That's why we call it master gland of our body, and it's ectodermal in origin. Now let's find the location of pituitary. While you were studying the skull, the skeletal system, try to remember the skull bones. There is a very important skull bone into the cranial region that is called as sphenoid bone, the wasp shaped bone, right? So it's present into sphenoid bone of cranial region, and this sphenoid bone has a special cavity which looks like Turkish chair, and that is called sella turcica, right? That is a special depression present inside this sphenoid bone, and this pituitary is captivated into that particular depression. Okay, so this is the diagram directly from NCERT. So if you talk about the pituitary, this connection is like hanging from the hypothalamus. We call it stalk or infundibulum. We tell this portion, we have named this portion as stalk or infundibulum. Yes, this particular portion is part of anterior pituitary, and anterior pituitary is also known as adenohypophysis. Now, what do you mean by adenohypophysis? Adeno means gland, the actual glandular part of pituitary. Adenohypophysis is the actual glandular part of pituitary. Actual glandular part of pituitary, that is also called as combination of pars distalis and pars intermedia. And in case of human pituitary gland, when you talk about this adenohypophysis or anterior pituitary, these two sections, that is pars distalis and pars intermedia, they are merged inside this adenohypophysis for human pituitary only. But for other animals, you will be finding inside the adenohypophysis there is distinct separation of this pars distalis and pars intermedia can be observed. So it's like this. If this is the pars distalis, this is the pars intermedia, and this is the pars nervosa. So there are three parts of pituitary can be observed. Togetherly this pars distalis and pars intermedia, which are merged with each other in human pituitary, we call it adenohypophysis, and this pars nervosa, this is called as neurohypophysis or the posterior pituitary. Okay, and this posterior zone, that is called posterior pituitary. You can also call it as neurohypophysis. Why it's called as neurohypophysis? Because you'll be finding directly neurons of hypothalamus are invading inside this region to release oxytocin and vasopressin. Got it? Okay. Now I've made a table of the anatomical parts of pituitary gland. So we know that pituitary, just we were discussing the pituitary has adenohypophysis or the glandular part of pituitary, and this neural part of pituitary, that is neurohypophysis. You can call this adenohypophysis as anterior and neurohypophysis as posterior. Adenohypophysis has two distinct zones, pars distalis and pars intermedia, but in case of our pituitary, they are merged, they are fused with each other, so they are almost merged with this, and pars intermedia, the intermediate pituitary is almost merged with this distal pituitary of adenohypophysis. And the hormones produced by this adenohypophysis are GH, growth hormone, secreted by somatotroph cells, prolactin PRL secreted by lactotroph cells or mammotroph cells, TSH secreted by thyrotroph cells, ACTH also called as corticotropin full name is adrenocorticotropic hormone or corticotropin hormone secreted by corticotrop cells. LH, luteinizing hormone. FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. These are called together you can call them gonadotropins, and they are produced by gonadotrop cells. Okay, now when you are studying about this PRL, prolactin, this hormone got another name called LTH, lutetropic hormone. So LTH is nothing but a synonymous terminology of the hormone called prolactin. Remember this. Okay. Now this corticotrop cells of pars intermedia regions secreting melanocyte stimulating hormone or MSH. This is gonna stimulate your melanocyte cells of your skin and increase your pigmentation by stimulating secretion of melanin. Yes. Now, neurohypophysis. Let's come to this part of pituitary. No hormones are produced here. Remember, the most important line about neurohypophysis or posterior pituitary, or also can be called as pars nervosa. It only stores and releases the hypothalamus produced hormones called oxytocin or vasopressin, or you can call these as ADH, antidiuretic hormone. So that was all about the anatomical portions of pituitary. Now let's discuss the function of the important hormones secreted by pituitary gland. Okay. First, obviously, we need to talk about growth hormone or somatotropic hormone or somatotropin. Pituitary, the most abundant hormone produced by pituitary, that is growth hormone, right? Why we call this as growth hormone? Because that is responsible for stimulating cell division, particularly that will be stimulating mitotic division, responsible for growth of bones and muscles of our body, right? Okay. Now, if you know that these hormones are produced in a very little amount, that is called the optimal amount or stress amount. If there is more production surpassing the optimal production, we call these as hypersecretion. And if your body is lowering the production of a particular hormone, we call that phenomena as hyposecretion. Hyposecretion, low secretion than optimal; hypersecretion, higher secretion than optimal. Okay. Now, what will happen in your body if there is hyposecretion of growth hormone during your childhood? So, in children, you can observe pituitary dwarfism are of two types: pituitary dwarfism and thyroid dwarfism. That is called cretinism. This is pituitary dwarfism. Here there will be only stunted growth because there will be malfunctioning in the growth of bones. But mentally the child will be just normal compared to other childs. But in case of thyroid dwarfism or cretinism, the cretin child will be dwarf as well as mentally abnormal. That is the difference between pituitary dwarfism and thyroid dwarfism. Okay. Now, in case of adult, if there is hyposecretion of growth hormone in adult, then what will happen? The diseases will appear, the disorders will appear, not disease, disorders will appear. Acromicria during the time of your adulthood, during the time of your adolescence. If you are suffering from hyposecretion, the jaw size will not attain its maximum. This is called acromicria. And also will be suffering from a disease called Simon's disease, and here you can observe premature aging. Okay. Now let's come to the hypersecretion part. What are the disorders can be observed if there is exaggerated secretion of growth hormone in your body? First, the most famous disorder, there is gigantism. That will happen during the time of childhood if there is hypersecretion. Extraordinary height, the person will attain extraordinary height, abnormal elongation of bones. Now, in case of adult, if there is, or adult, during the time of adolescence, if that person is suffering from hypersecretion of growth hormone, the conditions will be like this, called acromegaly. Acromegaly means larger jaw, chimpanzee like appearance will be there. There will be disfigurement, gorilla like appearance will be there, and obviously there are chance for premature death if there is acromegaly condition. The person can observe kyphosis. Now, what do you mean by kyphosis? Hump into back. It is called kyphosis. Bending of vertebral column also will be associated with this. Now, for these particular diseases during the time of early childhood, these are very hard to diagnose. Okay. Some other hormones or other important hormones are secreted by your pituitary gland. Prolactin. PRL is the short form, or you can also call this hormone as LTH. The short forms of prolactin, PRL or LTH. Okay. This prolactin hormone, they're responsible for growth of mammary glands and milk formation. They will be stimulating the mammary alveolar cells, lactogenic cells, to produce milk. Remember, prolactin stimulate production of milk, oxytocin stimulate ejection of milk. So do not get confused in between them. Okay. Prolactin also will be inhibiting gonadotropin releasing hormone, FSH hormone, and ovulation. That's why after the childbirth, it can be the frequent breastfeeding will be inhibiting the process of ovulation as well as conception, right? So it's a kind of when you talk about this natural contraceptive method, lactational amenorrhea. Due to frequent lactation, mother will not get pregnancy after a certain span or period of time after the childbirth, due to the excess titer of prolactin into mother's blood. You will be studying into class 12 chapter called reproductive health. Okay. Now TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, that will be stimulating thyroid gland, it will be telling thyroid gland to release T3 and T4. We call these hormones as thyroid hormones. Okay. Now another important hormone secreted by anterior pituitary, all these hormones are secreted by anterior pituitary. This prolactin, TSH, ACTH, LH, FSH. Adrenocorticotropic hormone, as because it will be targeting adrenal cortex region, right? Okay. Now adrenal cortex has 3 regions, but ACTH will be targeting only 2 regions. What are they? They will be targeting zona fasciculata of adrenal cortex and zona reticularis of adrenal cortex. And when it's stimulating, ACTH stimulating this zona fasciculata, that will stimulate release of glucocorticoids. One of the prime glucocorticoid is cortisol. So under influence of ACTH, your adrenal zona fasciculata will release cortisol hormone, and under influence of ACTH, your zona reticularis of your adrenal gland will release some androgen called DHEA, full from dehydroepiandrosterone. Okay. Another zone of your adrenal cortex, that is zona glomerulosa, that is not under influence or under control of ACTH. You need to remember this. Okay. Now let's move forward to the next hormone, gonadotropin, LH and FSH. Okay. LH, luteinizing hormone. What is the function of LH in male? In case of male, LH will be stimulating the Leydig cells or interstitial cells, right? It will be stimulating the Leydig cell or interstitial cells. That's why in case of male, LH is also called as ICSH, interstitial cell stimulating hormone. These Leydig cells are also called as interstitial cells. Now, where will be finding these interstitial cells? If this is the testis, inside the testis you will be finding these testicular lobules, this compartment kind of structures, and inside these testicular lobules you will be finding highly coiled tubular structures called seminiferous tubules. Inside the seminiferous tubules there will be sperm production happening inside your body, and the region outside the seminiferous tubule is called as interstitial space. The cells present into this space are called Leydig cells or interstitial cells, and your LH, if you are male, will be stimulating this Leydig cell, and that will cause secretion of androgens. And obviously the prime androgen is testosterone. So your testosterone secretion or androgen secretion is under control of LH hormone. Okay. Now let's come to the female secretion of LH in female. Now this LH hormone, luteinizing hormone, is the prime hormone for the ovulation inside female ovaries. Is responsible for ovulation. During the time of menstrual cycle, you will be finding a stage called LH surge. LH will increase 10x in compared to the normal LH level in female body, and that LH surge will cause kicking out the secondary oocyte from the mature follicle or Graafian follicle inside the ovaries. So that's why the prime factor for ovulation, and it will also cause formation of corpus luteum inside female ovaries, and due to this yellowish pigmentation of this particular body, and this corpus luteum will start releasing progesterone. Right. Now let's come to the FSH hormone, follicle stimulating hormone. Function of FSH in case of male. Function of FSH in case of male, it will be stimulating Sertoli cells, and the factors produced by Sertoli cells will be enhancing the process of spermatogenesis. Now, if you don't understand what is Sertoli cell, inside your testis you have these testicular lobules. Inside the testicular lobules you have these highly coiled tubes called seminiferous tubules. If you get inside seminiferous tubule, then you will be finding some cuboidal or sphere shaped cells. They will be modified into sperm, and there will be some elongated columnar cells. They are responsible for nourishing the maturing spermatozoa, and these cells are called as Sertoli cells, right? These Sertoli cells are under influence of follicle stimulating hormone. Okay. Now function of FSH in female body. As because they are named as follicle stimulating hormone, they will be stimulating maturing follicle inside female ovaries. They will be stimulating follicular cell, and that will cause secretion of estrogens. So in female ovary, secretion of progesterone is mainly under influence of LH, and secretion of estrogen is mainly under influence of FSH. Okay. Now let's come to oxytocin hormone. Oxytocin, a hormone produced by hypothalamus and stored into the posterior pituitary, right? Also, it's called as pitocin. The synthetic oxytocin is called as pitocin. During the time of parturition or childbirth, a doctor can inject this pitocin or oxytocin hormone for a smoother baby delivery process. Okay. So, it's responsible for smooth muscle contraction and uterine contraction. Oxytocin is responsible for smooth muscle contraction, and also this is called as birth hormone. Oxytocin is also called as birth hormone because it will be stimulating the smooth muscles of uterus and will be helping in uterine contraction for kicking out the baby. Basically, it's your uterus by the vigorous contraction trying to expel out the baby from to the outside of mother womb. That's why you can call this oxytocin hormone as birth hormone. Also, this is called as happiness hormone. It is also responsible for ejection of milk. Oxytocin hormone, this is also responsible for ejection of milk from mammary gland by stimulating the smooth muscular contraction. So when basically an infant is feeding on mother breast, there will be emotional connection between mother and the infant, and that will cause secretion of oxytocin, and that will create a reflex, and that will start release of oxytocin, and oxytocin will act on smooth muscles of your breast alveoli, and that will cause milk secretion. Okay. So milk secretion or ejection is one phenomena, milk production is another phenomena. Prolactin for milk production, oxytocin is milk ejection or milk secretion. Now the next hormone of hypothalamus but stored into the posterior pituitary, that is vasopressin or ADH. Their name is telling about their function. Vasopressin, pressing the blood vessel, acting as a vasoconstrictor to increase the blood pressure. Antidiuretic hormone. Diuresis means excess loss of water through urination. So it's antidiuretic, it's stopping your kidney from diuresis. That means it's stimulating your nephrons of your kidney to reabsorb water to increase the blood volume. So that's why it's written vasoconstriction and reabsorption of water. That is the main function of this particular hormone. And if there is hyposecretion, of vasopressin, you will be suffering from a particular kind of diabetes called as diabetes insipidus. That means there are another diabetes, that is diabetes mellitus, due to the hyposecretion of insulin, and this is due to the hyposecretion of vasopressin. The disease is called diabetes insipidus, that is called as tasteless or colorless urine due to the excess loss of water through your kidney. Okay. So we are done with pituitary. Now come to another important gland. It is biological clock of our body, that is pineal gland, and it is named as pineal due to its P-shaped structure, right? This is present below the corpus callosum. This is corpus callosum in between two cerebral hemisphere, and this is the dorsal part of your body. This is the ventral part of your body. So towards the dorsal side of your thalamus, you will be finding this particular pineal gland. So if you are asked about the location of pineal gland, dorsal side of forebrain, in between two in between two cerebral hemisphere, just below the corpus callosum. This region is called as corpus callosum. Okay. Now you know that who is regulating this pineal gland or epiphysis? This is under control of suprachiasmatic nucleus of hypothalamus. Okay. And the hormone secreted by pineal gland is called as melatonin hormone. This melatonin hormone is responsible for 24 hours of diurnal rhythm, maintaining your sleep awake cycle. Now, what do you mean by this? When there is darkness into your sleeping room, gradually that will be giving a stimulus to your hypothalamus, and your supraoptic nucleus will give signal to your pineal gland. Pineal gland will start releasing melatonin hormone, and this melatonin hormone will decrease the BMR rate, decrease the body activity, that will decrease the body temperature, and gradually will fall asleep, right? Now when it's morning time, gradually sunlight is coming, entering into your brain through your eyes. That will again stimulate the suprachiasmatic nucleus, not supraoptic, suprachiasmatic nucleus will be stimulated, and they will send inhibitory signal to pineal gland, and melanin secretion will be paused, and if there is no melanin or less melanin titer, so gradually your body activity will start increasing and will wake up. So that's why we tell this is the biological clock of our body, responsible for 24 hours diurnal rhythm. This help us to maintain the sleeps awake cycle. Okay. Also it help us to maintain body temperature. Basically it's decreasing the body temperature. It will be decreasing the BMR metabolic rate while you are going for sleep. It can decrease pigmentation, and in female it can delay menstrual cycle. Now how it can delay menstrual cycle? It is acting as anti-gonadotropin hormone. It can inhibit gonadotropin hormones, it can inhibit FSH, and that's how it's helping in delaying menstruation. It also acting as anti-MSH, anti-melanocyte stimulating hormone. If MSH secretion is inhibited, so there will be less pigmentation in your body. So that's why it can control pigmentation by acting on by exerting inhibitory action on MSH. It can also increase your defense capabilities. It can boost your immunity. Now how it can boost your immunity? It will start production of antioxidant and absorption of antioxidant, increase absorption of antioxidants from your food material. And obviously if there are more antioxidants are produced into your body, they're gonna boost your lymphocytes. That's why the secretion of this particular gland is very much important for us to maintain the biological clock of our body, and also to maintain our sleep awake cycle, and the immune also will be acting as the strengthener of your immune system. Okay, let's jump to the next endocrine gland, that is thyroid gland. Okay, now if you ask me, sir, why this gland is named as thyroid gland, which is present near to our throat region below the vocal cord, right? So first, location of this particular gland, throat region, either side of trachea, just below to the vocal cord. This particular gland, bilobed, mostly bilobed, and in few person you will be finding it's trilobed, but in most of the cases it's bilobed gland. There are two lobes which are connected by a piece of connective tissue called isthmus, right? Now, why it's called as thyroid gland? It the appearance of this particular gland is a special kind of shielding instrument used by ancient Greek warriors, right? We used to call them thyros. So it looks like thyros, or a special kind of shield used by Greek warriors. That's why it's called as thyroid gland or thyros shaped gland. Okay, so this is bilobed mainly, and inside each lobe you will be finding multiple small unit kind of structure. We call them lobules. So each lobe has multiple lobules. They are connected by special flap of connective tissue. We call it isthmus. So this is the portion of isthmus, and this is enveloped by a special capsule. This gland is enveloped by a special capsule, and obviously this is regarded as the largest endocrine gland. Okay. Now we need to study the hormones produced by thyroid gland. So this is a piece of tissue. Histological, while you are studying under microscope, this kind of tissue appearance can be observed, right? And inside that you'll be finding this cavity kind of structures. We call these as thyroid follicles, right? Okay, thyroid lobules. So each one of them are thyroid lobules, and inside every thyroid lobules there are multiple thyroid follicles are present. Inside thyroid lobules, multiple thyroid follicles are present, and the area outside the thyroid follicles are called stromal tissue. So when you are talking about a thyroid gland, suppose this is the thyroid gland. Inside this thyroid gland, you'll be finding multiple thyroid lobules, and inside each lobule you'll be finding thyroid follicles. These are thyroid follicles. And outside this thyroid follicle, this area is called as stromal tissue, or stromal area, or interstitial area. Okay. Now this thyroid follicles has special cells called follicular cells, right? Now what is happening inside the thyroid follicle? You need a special protein. It is called TGB, thyroglobulin. And this thyroglobulin protein has tyrosines.
amino acids on it. Which amino acid? Tyrosine's amino acid. This is whole molecule of TGB, thyroglobulin. These are called transporter proteins of our body for these thyroid hormones, and these have these amino acids called tyrosine. Now these tyrosines can hold iodine molecules. These tyrosines can hold iodine molecules. And when they will be reacting with each other, they will be forming first T1 and T2. That is called iodination of tyrosine. When iodine will bind with those tyrosines, we will be calling the phenomenon as iodination. So is produced from the amino acid tyrosine, or tyrosine is involved in production of thyroid hormones. It will be producing T1 and T2, monoiodotyrosine and monoiodothyronine and diiodothyronine, T1 and T2. It has one iodine, T2 has two iodines. Now they will be binding with each other. That is called coupling phenomena. That's called coupling phenomena. T1 and T2 will be binding with each other. Now when T1 will bind with T2, that will produce T3 triiodothyronine, and when T2 will bind with another T2, that will produce T4 tetraiodothyronine. And these are our thyroid hormones, T4 and T3. T4 is tetraiodothyronine, the major source of thyroid hormones. T4 also called as thyroxine hormone, and that will be converted into T3 in some cases, triiodothyronine, by the process of deiodination. So firstly or majorly inside your thyroid follicles, T4 is produced, and then after the process of deiodination, that will delete one iodine, and from T4 T3 will be produced. So which is more in amount, which is stored into our body? T4, which is called thyroxine, T4. What is the full form of T4? Tetraiodothyronine. It has 4 iodine, and that is converted into T3, because when you talk about the action or function, more active, T3 is more active than T4, because most of the tissue has the sensor or the receptor of T3. Okay, so let's talk about the histological aspect. These follicles have follicular cells. These follicular cells will be producing T4 and T3. T4 in large amount, 90 to 65% of thyroid hormones are T4, and only 10 to 35% are produced as T3. But our body has the capability, inherent capability to convert this T4 and T3, and T4 is one such exceptional hormone that our body can store it, right? Now, the stromal cell, the space outside these thyroid follicles, are called stroma region, and these stromal cells are also called as parafollicular cells or C cells. Also called as parafollicular cells or C cells. They are responsible for production of TCT, calcitonin. They are responsible for secretion of calcitonin hormone. That's why they are called as C cells. And full form of calcitonin also can be said like this: thyrocalcitonin or TCT. So what are the hormones produced by thyroid gland? They are T4, T3 and TCT. T4 and T3, they are called as iodothyronines, thyrocalcitonin, which is produced by parafollicular cells, whereas T4, T3, they are produced by follicular cells. TCT is a protein hormone. or peptide hormone. Okay. Now let's talk about function of the hormones produced by thyroid gland. Function of thyroid hormones. Okay. They're responsible for increasing basal metabolic rate, BMR. We call it regulation of BMR. Increase metabolism of your body. And how they're gonna increase metabolism of your body? By increasing oxygen consumption. And if there is more consumption of oxygen, that gonna break down, that gonna promote more and more intracellular respiration, breakdown of glucose and amino acid, and to produce calorie for you. So that's why production of energy upon metabolism is called calorigenic effect of thyroid hormones. Thyroid hormone also support your body for RBC formation, the process of hemopoiesis, that stimulate the process of biosynthesis of hemoglobin, control metabolism of carbohydrates, proteins and fats. It also help us to maintain water and electrolyte balance by giving signal to the cells to produce a special kind of pump. I call it Nokia pump. Sodium potassium ATPase pump for secretion and absorption of sodium and potassium. Thyroid hormones also can enhance the action of secretion of epinephrine and norepinephrine. They are adrenal medullary hormones. Okay. So these are the group of functions performed by T3 and T4. Right. Now let's observe the axis of T3 and T4 secretion. Your hypothalamus will be secreting TRH hormone, thyrotropin releasing hormone, that is stimulating your anterior pituitary to secrete TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. This thyroid stimulating hormone will be hitting your thyroid gland and to the follicular cells, and they will be releasing T4 and T3, right? And if there is high titer or the secretion of T3 or T4 is surpassing the optimal value of your body, then that will give a negative feedback to your hypothalamus to arrest the secretion of TRH and TSH, and that will decrease the production of T4 and T3. That is called negative feedback mechanism of this particular TRH, TSH and T4 axis. Okay. Now we got another hormone produced by the C cells or parafollicular cells, TCT, thyrocalcitonin. Now remember, this thyrocalcitonin is a hypocalcemic hormone. Now what do you mean by hypocalcemic hormone? They will deteriorate, low down the calcium level into your blood. Hypocalcemic means decreasing the calcium. From where? From your blood. Also they will decrease phosphate level in your blood, and TCT is a kind of protein hormone. Okay. Disorders of thyroid hormones upon hypersecretion or upon hyposecretion. First we will take a look for the hyposecretion of thyroid hormones. Hyposecretion. Okay. Now you know that whatever diet you are taking or consuming every day, 90% of iodine is observed by your thyroid glands. So obviously there will be effect of iodine on your thyroid. So if there is deficiency of iodine in your body, that's why doctor will recommend you to take iodized salt, the whole and sole source of iodine for our body. Okay. So if there is deficiency of iodine, that will cause hypothyroidism. And if a mother is not intaking proper iodine, then the child inside the womb will be facing a drastic problem of hypothyroidism during the time of pregnancy of her, and the newborn will be suffering from a special disease called cretinism or cretin child or thyroid dwarfism. This is also called as thyroid dwarfism. This cretinism is also called as thyroid dwarfism. Okay. So there will be defective development, stunted growth, that's called dwarfism. And you know that thyroid hormones also stimulate the production or development of CNS. Thyroid hormones also stimulate development of central nervous system, and if suffering from hypothyroidism, then there will be mental retardation, low intelligent quotient, deaf mutism, and abnormal skin. So these are the condition of or the child or the cretin child will be suffering from this kind of disorders. Okay. Now, what if hypothyroidism in adult? They will be suffering from a disease or disorder called myxedema. Now, what do you mean by edema? Bulged or swelling in your lymphoid glands. That condition is called myxedema, accumulation of watery fluid, right? So, myxedema is mainly observed in adults. So, there will be puffy appearance. These are the puffy appearance near to the eye or cheek region. And in females, there will be irregular menstrual activities. It's because metabolic rate will be influencing the menstrual activities, and if there is low metabolic rate due to the hyposecretion of thyroid hormones, that will affect menstrual cycle as well. Now, another disease that can be observed due to the hypothyroidism, that is goiter, simple goiter. Goiter is of two types. One is called exophthalmic goiter and one other is called simple goiter. For exophthalmic goiter, there will be exophthalmia, protruding eyes. But for simple goiter, only a gall or nodule will be formed here. Okay. Now, what is the reason behind this simple goiter? See, if there is low T3 and T4 in your body, that is called hypothyroidism, that will give a negative feedback to your thyroid, to your hypothalamus, and your hypothalamus will start increasing secretion of TRH, thyrotropin releasing hormone, that will give signal to your anterior pituitary. Your anterior pituitary will secrete more amount of TSH, and if more amount of TSH is hitting your thyroid tissue, that will cause proliferation of thyroid follicles, and that will cause this production of these nodules or gall, and that is called simple goiter, right? This kind of gall formation by enlargement of thyroid tissue. So this is only enlargement of thyroid tissue, but the follicular cells lost the inherent capability of production of T3 and T4. Now, let's talk about hyperthyroidism. Due to the cancer of thyroid glands or due to the development of tumors or nodules, the thyroid tissue will start increasing thyroid hormones, and what will happen then? That condition will be called as hyperthyroidism. And if there is more thyroid hormone in your body, that will increase metabolic rate. And if metabolism is increased, your cells will be unable to hold the nutrients inside. Now you will become thinner day by day if you are suffering from hyperthyroidism, right? That will that will also affect calcium metabolism, accumulation of calcium phosphate into your orbital bones, and that will push your eyeballs outwards. That will cause protrusion of eyeballs, and that's why we call it exophthalmic goiter or Graves disease or thyroiditis, inflammation of thyroid gland. And obviously there will be increased BMR, and if BMR is increasing day by day, there will be weight loss. So in case of hypothyroidism, there may be observed the person or the patient is gaining the weight because there will be less BMR, right? Cell is accumulating proteins, lipids and carbohydrates but not utilizing them. But in case of hyperthyroidism, cell is not accumulating them, cell is only utilizing them to burn your energy. Okay. Now the next gland after thyroid that is present just behind this thyroid gland is called as parathyroid gland. Okay, so when you're talking about parathyroid gland, they're present backside of thyroid gland. And how many parathyroid glands are there? One pair in each of two lobes. So total there are 4 parathyroid glands present. See, these are the parathyroid glands, 2 on each lobe. And the hormone released and produced by parathyroid gland there, that is called as parathormones. That is a kind of protein or peptide hormone. You can also call this as PTH, short form of parathyroid hormones or parathormone, and that is a regulator for calcium in our circulation, and basically that's an antagonist of TCT, and this is hypercalcemic hormone. Now what do you mean by this? TCT and PTH, they are antagonist. Antagonist means they are opposing function of each other. TCT, thyrocalcitonin, which is a hypocalcemic hormone which will be lowering down blood calcium, but PTH will be increasing blood calcium. So how they are doing so? See, this mineralic balance is maintained in between our bones and our blood. If the bone is demineralized, the calcium will enter into the blood and that will increase the calcium concentration. And when bone needs to be rebuilt, you need to send calcium from blood to bone, right, for mineralization. So this particular activity, demineralization of bone, and to increase the calcium level of blood, will be performed by the hormone called PTH, hypercalcemic hormone. But if you want to decrease the calcium level of blood and increase the and you want to recruit those calcium molecules for the construction of bone, you need the signal from TCT. So that's why we are calling TCT as hypocalcemic and PTH as hypercalcemic hormone, right? So function of PTH is given here, that promotes resorption of bone and increase calcium of blood. Resorption means demineralization. Okay. They also can regulate the level of magnesium ions and phosphate ions. Obviously, when there will be demineralization of bone along with calcium, phosphate HPO4 minus will be released into blood. That will be stimulating osteoclast. Osteoclasts are responsible for resorption of bone. Right? Osteoblasts are responsible for building the bone. Osteoclasts are responsible for eating the bone. They also stimulate resorption of calcium and magnesium from renal, reabsorption of calcium and magnesium from renal tubule. So if your renal tubule is absorbing calcium, that's gonna increase blood calcium level. Promote formation of calcitriol in kidney from vitamin D. Vitamin D, we say that vitamin D is a hormone. It's called as calcitriol. It's produced, that is converted into active hormone inside our kidney by influence of parathyroid hormones. And this calcitriol increases reabsorption of calcium, magnesium and phosphate from food into digestive system. That was the function of parathyroid hormone. Okay. Now what after thyroid gland? We have thymus, the thorn of our immunity, the thorn of our immunity. What do you mean by thymus? Thymus means a gland which is very close to our heart. That is the name of origin of the name thymus. Okay. There is also act as a primary lymphoid organ. Now, if you don't understand what is primary lymphoid organ, I am telling bone marrow and thymus, these two are primary lymphoid organ. They are responsible for production of B cells and T cells. Means B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes are produced inside them and matured inside them. Primarily, thymus is responsible for maturation of T cells. That's why T cells are got the letter T from this thymus. The hormone released by the gland is called thymosins, and this is also peptide hormone. Where will be finding your thymus gland? Behind the sternum on the ventral side of your aorta, near to your heart. It is also bilobed gland with multiple lobules. Major role in development of our immunity. And a very important line, retard aging process. If your immunity is boosted, the aging will be retarded. And one more thing, along with increasing age, the thymus gland will start shrinking. A very important fact about thymus gland, along with your aging process, the thymus gland will start shrinking, and that's the reason the elderly human will be finding that immune system is quite weaker than adult one or the younger ones. Okay. So this thymus gland, that is also called as throne of immunity or training school of T lymphocytes, because T lymphocytes are produced in bone marrow but matured in thymus. This thymus also has a cortex zone and medullary zone. The cortex zone produces cortex zones has this kind of cells: thymocyte cells, dendritic cells and epithelial cells. And these epithelial cells are responsible for production of thymosins. Right. And in medulla, you will be finding some special densely packed or colored cells called Hassel's corpuscles. Okay. So we are done with the function responsible for anti-aging process. Okay. How these T cells are matured and differentiated inside thymus gland. And obviously, we know that the immunity triggered by these T cells are called CMI, cell mediated immunity, and the immunity triggered by B cells or antibodies are called AMI or antibody mediated immunity or humoral immunity. Now, as because this is the training school of T lymphocytes, so what happens? Immature T cells will be entering into the thymus, and they will be matured and differentiated from naive T cells. There will be antigen presentation will be taking place inside the thymus gland. Until unless you are presenting antigen to the T cells, they won't start proliferation or maturation. There will be clonal selection of T cells. That is a process of discarding the abnormal T cell from your body, and if your clonal selection fails, that will cause autoimmunity, right? Autoimmunity is a case where your own immune system will try to attack your own tissues. Okay, so that's why clonal selection is very much important for us. And also, thymosin will be promoting antibody production by B cells. How it happens? B cells are converted into plasma cells, and plasma cells will be producing some proteins, and those are called as immunoglobulins or antibodies, and the immunity is called humoral immunity. Okay, so thymosin production degenerates in old individuals due to the shrinking process during the time of shrinking process of this thymus gland. So as soon as the thymus is degenerating, the thymosin production also falling into the blood, and that will decrease thymosin, and that will be weakening the immunity in elderly human. Okay, now let's come to the adrenal gland. Kidney is called as renal. The superior pole, at the superior pole of kidneys, you will be finding this adrenal adjacent to kidney. That's why you are naming it adrenal gland, or also named as suprarenal gland. Why suprarenal gland? That is present at anterior or superior part of each kidney. They present towards the anterior or superior pole of each kidney. Okay. Now, when you talk about adrenal gland, it has outer adrenal cortex and inner adrenal medulla. Outer adrenal cortex secretes some steroid hormones. We call them corticoids. Right? And if there is underproduction of these corticoid hormones from adrenal cortex region, that will cause specifically underproduction of cortisol and aldosterone, that will cause a disease called Addison's disease, the Thomas Addison, father of endocrinology. Okay, so what are the symptoms of this Addison's disease? Alters carbohydrate metabolism. Carbohydrate metabolism will be decreased. There will be imbalance of electrolyte. Who is responsible for maintaining carbohydrate metabolism? Cortisol. Who is responsible for maintaining electrolyte balance? Aldosterone. So these are kind of corticoids hormone or prime hormones of this adrenal cortex region. So if they are underproducing, your body will face severe weakness and fatigue, and that is called Addison's disease. Okay. And the hormones produced by adrenal medulla are called as catecholamines due to presence of a special chemical, a special catechol group. Now let's talk about them. Okay, so this is the structure of adrenal gland. So if this is adrenal gland, the inner part is called adrenal medulla, the outer part is called adrenal cortex, right? Now again, this cortex is divided into three zones. Outer zone is called zona glomerulosa. middle zone of adrenal cortex is zona fasciculata, and the innermost zone is called zona reticularis. And this part that is called adrenal medulla, and this part is adrenal cortex. Now, if you are forgetting the chronology of these tissue layers of adrenal cortex, just remember this term GFR. Outermost zona glomerulosa, innermost zona reticularis, middle one zona fasciculata. Okay. Now, when you talk about adrenal cortex region, it consists 80 to 90% volume of this particular gland. The outer zone, as we discussed, is called zona glomerulosa and responsible for production of mineralocorticoids, and the prime mineralocorticoids your body will be secreting, that is aldosterone. It is responsible for maintaining electrolyte balance of your body. Remember the process of RAS. Aldosterone will be working upon the DCT of your nephron inside your kidney, and that will cause conditional reabsorption of salt and water to increase blood volume and to increase blood pressure, and that can increase your glomerular filtration rate. Okay. The middle zone called zona fasciculata responsible for production of glucocorticoids. Why we call them glucocorticoids? Now, this prime glucocorticoids called cortisol, they can stimulate your body to break down glycogen and produce glucose into your bloodstream, that enhance glucose into your blood, that will cause hyperglycemia. That's why we are calling it glucocorticoids. So prime glucocorticoids is cortisol. Also you can call these as by the name of stress hormone. Other glucocorticoids are cortisone and corticosterone. Now, the innermost part of your adrenal cortex, that is called zona reticularis, that will be producing some androgens, and the prime androgen produced by zona reticularis is DHEA, dehydroepiandrosterone, and in some cases in female, this dehydroepiandrosterone can get converted into estrogen, right? And when you are talking about adrenal medullary zone, that is special cells called chromaffin cells. This adrenal medullary zone have special chromaffin cells, and these chromaffin cells are responsible for production of catecholamines hormones, and they are dopamine, adrenaline, noradrenaline. Adrenaline is also named as epinephrine. Noradrenaline is also named as norepinephrine. Now, out of these two hormones, adrenaline and noradrenaline, 80% is secreted as adrenaline and 20% is secreted as noradrenaline. But remember, these are catecholamine hormones, and obviously catecholamines are amino acid derivative or tyrosine derivative hormones. Okay. So basically, your body has this amino acid called tyrosine that will be converted into dopa. This dopa is converted into dopamine, and dopamine is converted into epinephrine. Then epinephrine get converted into norepinephrine. So this is the cascade, and here you can observe this is the catechol group, which you're gonna find in these particular catecholamine hormones inside dopamine, inside epinephrine, inside norepinephrine. And you need to remember these dopamines, epinephrine or norepinephrine, they're also acting as neurotransmitter of your body. They're not only functioning as hormone, they're acting as neurotransmitters. Yes. Now let's talk about some function of these catecholamines. They're responsible for 3F reactions. There is fight, flight or fright reaction. They're called as 3F reaction. Also can be called as emergency hormones. That's why we call them emergency hormones. They're rapidly secreted in stressed condition into to stimulate your emergency performance. They are under control of sympathetic nervous system. Very important line. Adrenal cortex is under control of ACTH hormone, but adrenal medulla is under control of your sympathetic nervous system. Preganglionic neurons, they will be stimulating the chromaffin cells. Sympathetic nervous system has some special neurons. They will be stimulating chromaffin cells, and those chromaffin cells will be producing these catecholamines with this special catechol group. Right. Okay. Now let's come to other hormones for adrenal cortex hormones. First, we'll talk about glucocorticoids, and you know the prime glucocorticoid is cortisol, and we know that this is a hyperglycemic hormone. That means increase glucose into blood. That's why we call it hyperglycemic hormone. They will be stimulating gluconeogenesis. Okay. Also, it can stimulate glycolysis, but majorly it will be stimulating gluconeogenesis, means from non-carbohydrate to glucose. Like for example, it can convert lactic acid into glucose. That's called gluconeogenesis or neoglucogenesis. That will be stimulating lipolysis and proteolysis. They will break down lipid and protein, and that will be converted into glucose. They are going to inhibit cellular uptake and utilization of amino acids. Means cortisol that has anti insulin effect. Insulin will be acting as an anabolic hormone, but this cortisol will be acting as a catabolic hormone that will promote catabolism, that will inhibit cellular uptake of amino acid, that will promote breakdown of glucose, glycogen to glucose, that will promote formation of glucose from non-glucose components called gluconeogenesis, and that's how contributing surge volume of glucose, surge amount of glucose into your blood. Maintaining cardiovascular system and kidney functions. There's also anti-inflammatory reactions or immune response suppression. That's why we call it stress hormone. When your body is stressed, your body, your immune system will become hyperactive, and this cortisol will suppress those immune activity. So if you are going through a prolonged stress, and if your body will start secreting a high amount of cortisol, that gonna affect your long-term health, because if your immunity is suppressed, then you will be vulnerable to multiple diseases, right? And upon special condition, when your body is not getting enough amount of oxygen, right, that will stimulate cortisol secretion, and that will give a signal to your kidney to release erythropoietin, and that will enhance the RBC production by your bone marrows under hypoxic condition. So that's why these are the functions of cortisols. Now let's come to the another corticoid, that is mineralocorticoid group, and the prime mineralocorticoid is aldosterone. Aldosterone, which is secreted under the influence of renin, right? Aldosterone is not secreted under influence of ACTH. Cortisol is secreted under influence of ACTH. Adrenal androgens are secreted under influence of ACTH, but aldosterone is not secreted under influence of ACTH, but it's secreted under the influence of renin hormone, right? Ultimately, renin will be converting angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1, then angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. Now this angiotensin 2 will be giving stimulus to your adrenal cortex to release aldosterone. So it helps us to maintain water and electrolyte balance. How it's maintaining the water and electrolyte balance, I already said. Stimulate reabsorption of sodium and water, and also stimulate excretion of potassium, phosphate and H plus ion through your DCT of nephron, and also maintain osmotic pressure and blood pressure. So it's like this. If there is low BP, that will stimulate low GFR in your kidney, low glomerular filtration rate. This low GFR will be sensed by your juxtaglomerular apparatus, JGA, present into your nephrons, and this JGA, specifically the JG cells, juxtaglomerular cells of JGA into your nephron, will be secreting the hormone called renin, and this renin will convert angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1, and this angiotensin 1 near to the lungs will be converted into angiotensin 2. This angiotensin 2 will give signal to adrenal cortex, specifically the zona glomerulosa only, to secrete aldosterone. So this is how aldosterone secretion is influenced, and this aldosterone will stimulate your DCT of your nephron for the absorption of salt and water, and secretion of potassium, phosphate and the protons, means H plus ions. Okay. Now the next and one of the most important heterocrine gland of your body, there is pancreas. Yes. So it's written that pancreas is a composite mix or heterocrine gland, because pancreas has both exocrine tissue as well as endocrine tissue. The exocrine part of pancreas is called pancreatic acini, which is responsible for secretion of pancreatic enzymes, pancreatic juice, and the endocrine part, that is called islets of Langerhans, that is responsible for secretion of pancreatic hormones called insulin, glucagon, somatostatin, pancreatic polypeptide hormones. Okay. So if you zoom inside the pancreatic islets, surrounded by, why we are calling this particular tissue as pancreatic islets, surrounded by the exocrine tissue called pancreatic acini, right? These are pancreatic acini, and this particular is the pancreatic islets, right? Small island. Now, these islets have different kinds of cell: alpha cells, beta cells, F cells, and delta cells. The alpha cells will be producing the hormone called glucagon. Beta cell will be producing the hormone called insulin. Delta cell will be producing the hormone called somatostatin, and F cell or PP cell will be producing the hormone, pancreatic hormone called pancreatic polypeptide, right? Okay. Now let's explore their functions. First talk about glucagon. Glucagon is a peptide hormone. So insulin and glucagon both are peptide hormone, protein hormone. Glucagon is made up of 29 amino acids. Now for our NCERT, peptide hormones and protein hormones are kept under a same umbrella. Okay. So it's made up of 29 amino acids and it's responsible for maintaining normal blood glucose. Basically, that will be causing hyperglycemia, hyperglycemic hormone. Now, hyperglycemic, you know that enhanced glucose into your bloodstream is called hyperglycemia. How it will be causing hyperglycemia? Stimulates hepatocytes. Now, you know that inside your liver cells or hepatocytes, the storage of glycogen, they will be breaking down glycogen by the process of glycogenolysis, and also they will be stimulating gluconeogenesis. Both the process will be contributing to the rise titer of glucose into bloodstream. Glycogenolysis, glycogen broken down into glucose, and gluconeogenesis or neoglucogenesis means conversion of lipids and protein into glucose. And they will be reducing cellular glucose uptake and utilization. Means again this hormone is an antagonist of insulin. They will be stimulating catalysis but inhibiting stimulating, so not catalysis, that they'll be stimulating catabolism and inhibiting anabolism of glucose. Okay. Now next and the most important hormone of pancreas, that is insulin. It's also peptide hormone made up of 51 amino acid. It has a functional A chain and B chain. Act on hepatocytes, adipocytes mean fat cells, as well as on myocytes, your muscle cells. Now this is a hypoglycemic hormone that is responsible for lowering down the glucose and sending them back to the liver and your muscle cell for storage. So that's why they will be promoting glycogenesis, formation of glycogen after polymerization of glucose. So that's why you need to stimulate the cells to uptake glucose, and after polymerization the glucose will be converted into glycogen. So that's why they are hypoglycemic hormone. They'll be decreasing the level of glucose into your blood, and also they promotes protein and fat synthesis. Anabolism. So insulin will be stimulating anabolism. So that's why if there is hyposecretion of insulin, there will be more glucose into your blood. We'll be calling it as glycosuria. There will be breakdown of lipid and formation of ketone bodies, and that will cause ketoacidosis or ketonuria of blood, and ultimately they are indication of blood sugar or diabetes mellitus. Okay. Somatostatin hormones, they are inhibitor for glucagon and insulin. This slows absorption of nutrients from gastrointestinal tract. So they are kind of inhibitor. Pancreatic polypeptide. Okay, another important hormone of pancreas. They inhibit somatostatin, responsible for gallbladder motility, means gallbladder contraction and secretion of bile juice. and secretion and production of pancreatic enzymes under influence of this hormone pancreatic polypeptide. Now, disorders caused by hyposecretion of insulin, prolonged hyperglycemia, initially that can be detected by glycosuria and ketonuria, glucose in urine and blood, ketone bodies in blood and urine. That is called ketonuria, ketone bodies in urine, glucose in urine. So, the combination of both the condition is denoting towards having diabetes mellitus. Diabetes means blood sugar, mellitus means sweet urine, that means more glucose in your urine. So, normally glucose is considered as high threshold component of your body. Until and unless it's crossing the threshold level, if you are suffering from prolonged hyperglycemia, and then only glucose will be thrown out from your kidney into your urine, and then only we will be finding stress of glucose into urine, and that is the indication of diabetes mellitus. Mellitus means sweet. Okay. Now we are done with the common endocrine glands. Now let's talk about gonads. For male, testes or testis, and for female, ovaries. So first talk about testis. It's called as primary sex organ in male. Primary sex organ means responsible for production of gametes, sperm, as well as production of male sex hormones, androgens. That's why we are calling it primary sex organ. There is also heterocrine glands. See, sperm production and sperm release of sperm, that is the exocrine process. Testosterone production, there is an endocrine process. So that's why we are calling this as a heterocrine gland, right? Okay. Now if you get inside the testis, you will be getting seminiferous tubules, highly coiled tubules present inside testicular lobules. They are responsible for spermatogenesis. And for the process of spermatogenesis, you need stimulus of testosterone hormone as well as the factors secreted by Sertoli cells. Now, what do you mean by Sertoli? Stromal Sertoli cells, we are coming into that. Outside the seminiferous tubules, we got stromal tissue. Also, these stromal cells are called as Leydig cells or interstitial cells, right? Leydig cells present into the stromal space outside the seminiferous tubule inside the testis. There are certain coiled tubules. We call them seminiferous tubules. Outside those tubules, we call those space as stromal space or stromal tissue, and cells found inside, they are called Leydig cells or interstitial cells, and they are responsible for production of androgen hormones. Androgens are a group of male sex hormones, and the prime androgen is testosterone, and also it will be producing dihydrotestosterone, right? Testis is an extra abdominal organ present inside the scrotum or scrotal sacs. Each scrotal sac has one testis, and this particular situation is to maintain the temperature, specific temperature is -2 to 2.5 degrees Celsius temperature than your body temperature. That will be favorable for this process of spermatogenesis. Okay, so it's like this. Your hypothalamus that is producing gonadotropin releasing hormone GnRH, that is stimulating your pituitary, or specifically anterior pituitary, that will be releasing gonadotropic hormone. There are two gonadotropins, LH and FSH, LH and FSH. Now this LH will act upon the Leydig cells present into the interstitial space or the stromal space, and they are responsible for secretion of androgens or male sex hormones. FSH will act on Sertoli cell. Under influence of FSH, Sertoli cell will secrete multiple hormones like androgen binding protein, sperm maturation factor, and many other nourishing components. They are responsible for attracting androgens inside the seminiferous tubules of testes, where sperm formation will be happening, and the sperm maturation factor, they are responsible for maturation of sperm, that is formation of spermatozoa. So that's why both these hormones are necessary for the action or maintaining the proper action of male reproductive system. Okay. Now let's talk about androgens, means testosterone, dihydrotestosterone. They regulate the development and maturation and function of male accessory sex organs like epididymis, vas deferens, seminal vesicles, prostate glands, urethra, etc. Also, these androgens are responsible for spermatogenesis process. These hormones stimulate muscular growth and growth of facial hair and axillary hair, means hair of your armpit and pubic region. Aggressiveness of male, low pitch voice, that is called, they are called secondary sexual characteristics feature. So these androgens are responsible for development of secondary reproductive parts of your reproductive system, and also secondary sexual characteristics features. Androgens play a major stimulatory role in the process of spermatogenesis, that is the process of formation of spermatozoa from the precursor cells, right, from the germ cells. Androgens act on the central nervous system, very, very important. So not only hormones, not only your nerve signal can stimulate hormone production, but your hormones can also stimulate your nervous system. That's true. So your nervous system can stimulate your endocrine system, and your endocrine system also can stimulate your nervous system. Okay. And this particular function or influence of testosterone upon our central nervous system is responsible for male sexual behavior called as libido. Male sexual behavior called as libido. Okay. Now these particular hormones produce also anabolic effects on protein and carbohydrate metabolism. That's why these are also can be called as anabolic steroid hormones. Obviously, these androgens are steroid hormones. And this promote anabolism, accumulation, production of protein into your cell, production of glycogen into your cell. So that's why bodybuilders, they sometimes they will be taking this kind of hormones artificially for their muscular growth or to increase their body volume. But over intake is again is harmful, very much harmful, that can even cause kidney failure. Okay. Now ovaries and the hormones. So you know that there are one pair of ovaries present into the lower abdominal zone of female. Ovaries act as primary sex organ, secretion of female sex hormones, as well as production of ovum or female gamete. Okay. These are a kind of retroperitoneal organ, these ovaries. They are not exactly present inside the abdominal cavity. That is present outwards to the abdominal wall. That's why we call that we are calling it retroperitoneal organs. Now, can you please tell me, apart from these ovaries, is there any example of retroperitoneal organs described in NCERT? They are kidneys. Okay. So the estrogens produce wide-ranging actions such as stimulation of growth and activities of females' secondary sex organs and development of growing ovarian follicles, appearance of female secondary sexual characteristics, which are, what do you mean by female secondary sexual characteristics? Which are high pitch of voice, formation of mammary glands, development, right, and deterioration of formation of cutaneous, subcutaneous hair in female body. Estrogens also regulate female sexual behavior. Testosterone regulates male sexual behavior. Estrogens, particularly estradiol, is the prime estrogen, is responsible for female sexual behavior. And progesterone, which is mainly secreted by corpus luteum. Estrogens mainly secreted by ovarian follicle, but corpus luteum also can produce a good amount of estrogens, and both of these hormones can be produced by placenta during the time of gestation. Progesterone supports pregnancy, that's why progesterone is called as pregnancy hormone. Progesterone also acts on the mammary glands and stimulates the formation of mammary alveoli, the sac-like milk-producing structures for storing milk inside the breast or mammary glands, and also they have certain role in milk secretion, progesterone. So this is very important hidden line of NCERT. Progesterone not only responsible for maintaining pregnancy, maintaining uterine endometrium, but also responsible for formation of mammary alveoli or alveolar sac, which are responsible for storing the milk and also influencing the secretion of milk. Okay. Now we'll talk about some hormones produced by some glands other than these core endocrine glands, right? So can you remember beginning of this particular lecture, we were talking about organized and non-organized gland. So we are done with studying organized endocrine glands. Now we are heading towards hormones secreted or produced by non-organized endocrine glands. Okay. So the atrial wall of our heart. So if you are asked hormone of your heart, so the answer is ANF, atrial natriuretic factor, a very important peptide hormone. The nature of the hormone is peptide in nature, and obviously that is responsible for decreasing BP and decreasing GFR, antagonistic of renin, angiotensin, aldosterone as well as ADH. Okay, now let's peep inside the nephrons of kidney. The juxtaglomerular cells, JG cells of kidney, a part of JGA, juxtaglomerular apparatus. Now, what is the location of this JG cell? The wall of afferent arteriole of glomerulus. Where? At the wall of afferent arteriole of glomerulus, you will be finding this juxtaglomerular cell. Where you are finding them? The wall of, outer wall of afferent arteriole only, right? So they also produce peptide hormone called erythropoietin, which stimulates the process of blood formation, RBC formation, erythropoiesis, and also these juxtaglomerular cells also responsible for production of the hormone renin, responsible for maintaining your blood pressure and GFR. Now let's get inside the gastrointestinal tract, inside your alimentary canal. You secrete 4 major peptide hormones, namely gastrin, secretin, cholecystokinin or CCK, and gastric inhibitory peptide or GIP. Let's see their function. Let's explore their functions. Gastrin, which is a local hormone, autocrine hormone, acts on the gastric glands and stimulate secretion of hydrochloric acid and the gastric enzymes called pepsinogen. When these pepsinogens will be activated into pepsin, they will be hydrolyzing the long protein chains and will be breaking them down into smaller protein or peptide and peptone chains. Now let's talk about the secretin, first discovered hormone, which is secreted by your intestine, acts on exocrine pancreas and stimulates secretion of water and bicarbonate ions. So secretin act on acini cells of pancreas and responsible for non-enzymatic secretion of pancreatic juice. Now let's come to this hormone CCK, cholecystokinin, very important hormone. It will be acting both on pancreas and gallbladder. That will be stimulating secretion of pancreatic enzymes. Secretin will be stimulating pancreas for secretion of non-enzymatic part of pancreatic juice. CCK, cholecystokinin, will be stimulating pancreatic acini to secrete pancreatic enzymes and will be stimulating gallbladder to release bile juice. Now, gastric inhibitory peptide, GIP. Thus, all of these are hormones of your gastrointestinal tract. GIP inhibits gastric secretion and the gastric motility means churning movement. It will be inhibiting churning movement of your stomach. And there are certain other important growth factors produced by different tissues for our body. Growth factors are produced by some unknown tissues, means miscellaneous tissues of our body. They're essential for the normal growth and formation of growth receptors. By they will be giving signal or message to your tissue and body tissue and cells to form to generate or promote the formation of growth receptors, right? Now these growth receptors are responsible for binding of these growth factors and growth hormone, and they will be stimulating the process of cell division, cell proliferation, and obviously overall growth of your body. Okay. Now we have come to the last part of this chapter, that is the mechanism of action of hormones and their types. Now to study the mechanism of action, we have to classify the hormones first. So on the basis of their chemical nature, hormones are divided into 4 groups. The first group is of peptide, polypeptide and protein hormones. Who are they? Hormones of your pancreas, they are insulin and glucagon. All the pituitary hormones are protein or peptide hormones. All the hypothalamic hormones like oxytocin, vasopressin, they are protein or peptide hormones. TCT, thyrocalcitonin, peptide hormone or protein hormone. PTH, parathyroid hormone, peptide hormone or protein hormone. Thymosin, peptide hormone or protein hormone. Next group, steroids hormones. Okay. Now, steroids hormones are basically lipid derivatives. If you get inside the body, you will be finding the steroid hormones, they have the cholesterol nucleus as cholesterol moiety inside them, that derived from cholesterol basically. Yes. So they are cortisol, corticosteroid, testosterone, estradiol, the prime estrogen, progesterone, all of them are steroid hormone. Aldosterone is also a steroid hormone. Iodothyronins, they're thyroid hormones basically. T3, triiodothyronin with 3 iodine. T4, tetraiodothyronin with 4 iodine. Okay. Now, amino acid derivative hormone, the fourth group, example is given as epinephrine, norepinephrine. They're basically catecholamines. They are derived from epinephrine, is derived from the amino acid tyrosine. Another amino acid derivatives from tryptophan. Tryptophan derivatives are melatonin, and serotonin. These are tryptophan derivatives, right? Melatonin, serotonin. But in our syllabus, we only have to study about this epinephrine and norepinephrine. They are tyrosine derivative. Okay. Now let me tell you this peptide hormones. These peptide hormones and these amino acid derivative hormones. These peptide hormones and amino acid derivatives are hydrophilic in nature. Now, if you are hydrophilic, you have enmity with lipids, you are lipophobic, right? And if you think about your cell membrane, it has phospholipids, a bilayer of phospholipids, right? So, if you want the entry inside the cell, you need to make a friendship with your cell membrane, right? And if you are lipophobic and hydrophilic, you cannot enter inside the cell. But if you are lipophilic and hydrophobic, then you are friend of cell membrane and it will give you access to enter inside the cell. So that's why peptide hormones and amino acid derivative hormones, they will act from outside the cell, and steroid hormones, very smaller in size, and obviously they are lipid derivatives, and iodothyrionins, due to presence of this iodine with them, right? These iodothyrionins and steroid, they can diffuse inside the cell by crossing the cell membrane. So depending upon that, when you talk about the mechanism of action, we have to study 2 mechanism of action of hormone, means how they are targeting, giving signal to their targeting cell. One, that is mechanism of action of hydrophilic and lipophobic hormone, and second one is mechanism of action of hydrophobic but lipophilic hormone. Philia means love and phobia means fear. So we are gonna talk about hydrophilic hormones. Now, who are hydrophilic hormones? All the protein and peptide hormones are hydrophilic, like TSH, hydrophilic hormone, right? Growth hormone, hydrophilic hormone but lipophobic. All the amino acid derivatives, catecholamines, dopamine, then your epinephrine, norepinephrine means adrenaline, they're also hydrophilic hormones. Okay, and this melatonin, it has dual nature. Sometime it will act uh, from outside the cell, sometime it can get inside the cell. So we'll be talking about the major mechanism of action of hydrophilic hormones. So this is a blood vessel. That is carrying hydrophilic hormones, and these hydrophilic hormone molecules, after getting out from the blood vessel, will come near to the target cell, though the cell will not permit to enter inside, but it's carrying some message. So these hydrophilic hormones are called as first messenger. Now, as because it cannot get inside the cell, it will be needing a third party to send the message to the cell, and that is called as second messenger, right? Now, how it will be stimulating or activating the second messenger? The hydrophilic hormone will bind with a cell surface receptor, a transmembrane receptor called as GPCR, G protein coupled receptor. It's a transmembrane or membrane bound receptor. So as soon as it's binding with this GPCR, G protein coupled receptor present on cell membrane, it will be activating a special enzyme inside the cell called as adenylyl cyclase or adenylate cyclase, right? Now, once this adenylyl cyclase is activated, that will convert ATP into cyclic AMP, CAMP, because of its special cyclic structure. Because of its special cyclic structure, we call this as cyclic AMP. So cyclic AMP is a conversion of ATP molecule by the action of the enzyme adenylyl cyclase, and the CAMP, that is acting as secondary messenger. Now that will carry the message for this hydrophilic hormone. Now this CAMP, what it will do in turns, it will activate the inactivated protein kinase inside the cell. You will be getting a protein kinase which is a switch present into switch off form. It was a switch off form, now is switched on. The protein kinase, when the protein kinase is activated by the action of the second messenger cyclic AMP, it will give phosphate group to a protein, and this phosphorylated protein will change the physical function or will initiate a particular physical function of your body. So that's how hydrophilic hormone is performing. Some other second or secondary messengers are CGMP, cyclic guanosine monophosphate. Even calcium can act as secondary messenger. DAG, IP3, inositol phosphate, can also act as secondary messengers. Again, I am repeating it. If this is the cell, this is the cell. Now, this particular hormone wants to send a signal inside the cell, but permission is not granted because of its hydrophilic and lipophobic nature. So what it will do? It will go and bind with a transmembrane protein, 7-fold protein called G protein coupled receptor. This G protein coupled receptor will activate a special enzyme that will convert ATP into cyclic AMP, CAMP. Now this cyclic AMP will get inside the cytoplasm and it will convert a switched off protein into a switched on protein. Yes, that is the function of this secondary messenger. Now when the protein or the enzyme is switched on, it will perform phosphorylation of another inactivated protein by donating phosphate group, and when this phosphate group is merged with this protein, the cellular activity will be initiated. Now let's come to the second type, the function of hydrophobic hormones or lipid soluble hormones. But what are insoluble hormones? So they are hydrophobic but lipophilic hormones. Who are they? They are obviously steroid hormones, testosterone, estrogens, and they are iodothyronins. Due to the presence of iodine, they are permeable inside the cell. Now, who are iodothyronins? T3 and T4. How they will work? They will get out of blood stream, and this lipid soluble hormone will diffuse inside the cell by crossing the phospholipid bilayer of cell membrane, and when they are getting inside the cell, they need a validator, and the validator is a special kind of protein, receptor protein. Now this hormone will get inside the cell and will bind with the receptor protein and will form a hormone receptor complex, right, inside the cytoplasm, or directly they can get inside the nucleus, and this hormone receptor complex will go and bind with a special part of DNA. Is a part of it, will incorporate with central dogma, right? What is central dogma? DNA to DNA, DNA to mRNA, mRNA to protein, right? This continuous pathway is called central dogma. So it will incorporate with a special gene, and that will alter the gene expression. Directly the hormone with this binding protein forming a hormone receptor complex will give a signal to the DNA means gene, and if gene expression is altered, there will be altered formation of mRNA, and mRNA is responsible for production of protein with the help of ribosomes. Now this newly formed mRNA directs synthesis of specific proteins, and that protein will alter the cellular activity or the physiological activity. So what is the aim of these particular hormones? They binds with intracellular receptor and alter gene expression. So that is the mechanism of action of hydrophobic or lipophilic hormone. Okay, so now we'll check our knowledge by practicing few questions, and after that the chapter is end. Okay. So if you don't if you want further clarification of these two processes, the mechanism of action of this hydrophilic hormones and lipophilic hormones, I am explaining it again. Okay. Now, suppose this is our friend Chintu. And Chintu's girlfriend is sitting inside a room. Right? Now, he wants to send some chocolate to his girlfriend or to his best friend, but father of Chintu's friend is standing here with stick, because there is some enmity in between Chintu and the father of Chintu's girlfriend, right? Or Chintu's best friend, whatever you say. So, while he is hovering near to the house of Chintu's girlfriend Chinti, his father will be repelling him, will be beating him badly, right? So don't ever try to approach my daughter. But still, after that also, Chintu is so much dedicated. He's not that much dedicated for studying. He's dedicated to give. He has a aim to give this chocolate and rose to his best friend, right? Now, how to send? How he'll be sending this? So he'll be doing a treaty with younger sister or younger brother of Chinti, and with the help of window of the house, he will be sending these chocolates and rose to the Chinti with the help of the younger brother by bribing him some extra chocolate. So this younger brother is acting as secondary messenger for Chintu, who was actually the primary messenger. And the father is acting as the cell membrane which will be inhibiting the entry of Chintu inside the house. So that was the function of hydrophilic but lipophobic hormone. But if we talk about the function of steroid hormones or iodothyroid hormones, they are lipophilic but hydrophobic. So easily he will be welcomed to enter the house of Chinti, because their family has affinity towards Chintu, and easily he will come, he will talk, and he will spend some quality time. So that's why it's directly sending the message. Chintu is directly sending the message to Chinti by entering into their house, and that is the mechanism of action of hydrophobic but lipophilic hormone. Okay, now let's solve some questions. By which structure hypothalamus is connected with anterior lobe of pituitary gland? So the answer is anterior lobe of pituitary gland. This is hypothalamus, this is pituitary, this is anterior pituitary, this is posterior pituitary. So there is a connection or a special portal system which is connecting the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary, that is hypophyseal portal system. Next question. Which of the following option is correct for the location of pineal gland? Okay, the first option is under corpus callosum and between the cerebral hemisphere. Correct answer. Assertion and reason. Okay, assertion said that melatonin influence the menstrual cycle. Yes, exactly. Pigmentation of body and defense capability. So that is absolutely true statement. And the reason is it plays important role in the regulation of diurnal rhythm. That's also true. See, both the assertion and reason are true, but reason is not correct justification of assertion. It's not explaining how or why melatonin will be influencing the menstrual cycle and pigmentation and defense capability. So reason is just another function. So the answer will be both an assertion and reason are true, but reason is not correct explanation of assertion. Next question. Which of the following shows abnormality in skin, stunted growth means dwarfism, as well as deaf mutism? Okay. Stunted growth can be due to the function of hyposecretion of thyroid hormones or due to the hyposecretion of growth hormone. But when it's paired with deaf mutism and abnormality of skin, then it must be hypothyroidism called cretinism. So with this, we are at the end of this chapter, chemical coordination and integration. Do not forget to check the DPP given into our PW app, and for the time being, it's bye bye, and stay tuned with our channel PW NEET English. And if you are watching our videos but not subscribed yet, please do subscribe and press the bell icon so that whenever the channel is getting new videos, you will be notified.